Samra Kazina.
Good afternoon, everyone.
For example,
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Please, we will start in 4 minutes. May I ask all of you to have your phone on silent, please? I wouldn't dream of asking you to have it off. It's not going to happen. If everyone is seated and ready, we can start maybe a minute earlier, as I see that the audience is eager and already here. So, good afternoon, and welcome to Astana International Forum. My name is Afaf Saudi. I'm an executive producer at Al Jazeera Network, and I will be your moderator for today's panel, Eurasia, Paving the Way to Sustainable Development. 17 Sustainable Development Goals were set by the UN back in 2015. It was a call for action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, all people will enjoy peace and prosperity. How far are we from these goals in these regions? What are the challenges, opportunities that are unique to this region so that they can reach their sustainable development goals? To elaborate on this topic, I am delighted to introduce our guest and expert on this panel. He is the CEO for Biterec Holding, a key financial institutional of the government of Kazakhstan. He has 17 years of experience in leading banking investments in emerging markets. Please welcome Mr. Kanat Shalapayev. A former advisor to Jacques Chirac, currently an investment banker and a member of the board of directors for Biterec. She has been in this country back in 1990, and she issued the first Visa credit card. Please welcome Mrs. Marie-Hélène Bérard. He is the executive director of Rungis Market, one of the largest wholesale markets. They have projects everywhere in Central Asia. Please welcome Mr. Benoît Juster. He has over 20 years of experience in security and financial sector in Hong Kong and mainland China. He is currently the managing director of China International Capital Corporation. Please welcome Mr. Barry Chan. He is a lead, and last but not least, he is a lead economist with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. He has lived in Georgia and established the International School for Economics. Please welcome Mr. Eric Livni. I would like to start with Mr. Shalapayev, please. So my first question is, as a financial institution, how is Biterec ensuring that its investment projects are in line with sustainable development goals?
Thank you, Afaf. Thank you. I just would like to thank my fellow panelists today for their participation and to the organizers of this event. I think Astana International Forum, in its evolved version, has now much broader agenda than just the economy. And I think this is a platform for the dialogue building and making sure that we resolve whatever differences we have through the means of constructive dialogue. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. The key here is Eurasia is a very interesting region, right? I think and Kazakhstan has a very specific role in Eurasia. In a current environment where supply chains get broken, right, where the logistics becomes challenging, where food security and sustainability become a very, very important topics on the agenda of the governments and in the development institution. I think Kazakhstan has a major role to play in that area. For us, when we talk about sustainable development, it's important to recognize the three parts to it, which I believe are very important. Economic growth without social progress and environmental protection is worthless. You cannot grow economy just by exploiting either the social resources or the environmental resources without paying attention to them. And I think from that standpoint, Biterec as a main agent of the state of Kazakhstan in the world of finance can balance out the sustainability and economic models giving a greater consideration to both the social and the environment as well. I think we have a number of institutions, and I think I have prepared multitude of examples here, right? But Bayterek as a holding has got a very big profile in both sustainability, environmental, and social factors. I will probably start with something that is important to most of us, is the housing and construction, and making sure that it's both affordable and sustainable. And we have a, I referred earlier, I think yesterday, to the S for us is a lot what Basib Bank does. It's our subsidiary in Kazakhstan that focuses on mortgages. It's a fourth largest financial institution in the country by assets now, and they provide mortgages at a concessional rates and help people to get on a property ladder. One of the examples that we talk about is the gender-driven program. It's called UMAI. It's where, and I repeatedly tell this before to everybody, women are better credit. They always pay, and they always repay. There are countless examples. Eric probably knows them. In microfinance, in mortgage, there's always a very, very strong credit profile that is associated with female borrowers. And we have a program because women don't have problems keeping up with their payments, but they have problems with collecting initial deposits. We make a light requirements and make sure that women, mothers can get on the property ladder and work together. And we also provide to the socially disadvantaged groups in Kazakhstan, we provide a what we refer to as a subsidized rent to get people into a safer environment and help them to basically take care of themselves and allocate more financing to the development of their children rather than just to rent. The overall, from our portfolio, I think we have under $400 million that we now currently dedicate and alternative energy-driven projects. So there are a number of examples, but the wind, hydro, solar, we are working towards providing a slightly different energy to Kazakhstan, which, as everybody knows, is an oil-driven country. Another subsidiary of Bayterek, it's the SME fund that contributes to development of small and medium enterprises called DAMU. It's a great organization. The work of which is evidenced by the growing share of SMEs in the GDP of Kazakhstan. 36% we've reached this year. Last year it was 33, and I hope it will continue growing. I know by international standards it's not a big number, but we believe that broad-based SME-driven growth is the only way out to diversify the economy. In 2020, I think the first organization in between the sovereign-owned entities to issue green bonds was DAMU, right? And we have cooperation with other DFIs or international institutions. We have a credit line for around 200 million euros, right, denominated in tenge, but it's again providing support to SMEs that were impacted by the COVID, and we've designed that program specifically for that. We've placed first social bonds. The number in absolute value is small, but we're paving a way for the investor to recognize we've placed 1 billion tenge social bonds a couple of years ago through DAMU fund. So to us, I think there's a lot of things that we try to do in that direction. Another important aspect of what to do is investing in agriculture, and making it sustainable in Kazakhstan is complicated. We have no shortage of land resources, but we do have shortages of water. We need to recognize that. We need to work towards creating a more sustainable agriculture in Kazakhstan. So I think our commitment, and for those who don't know, we're literally the largest lender in the sector right now. Whether this is a good thing or not, it's a different question. In some places, we want other institutions to play a bigger role, but we've reached a $500 billion mark on lending to agricultural sector in the country. And what we try to do, we just don't lend to only big ones. There is a microfinance. There is leasing of the machinery and equipment. There is help that we assist the credit unions that work directly with the farmers. And that, in that portfolio of $500 billion is a very broad-based one. But I think for us, it's important to continue to focus on agricultural technology, to make efforts to encourage the farmers to use smart water technologies, responsible usage of fertilizers. So all those things will enable to contribute to two things. First of all, rural employment and social well-being. Over 40% of population of Kazakhstan is actually living in rural areas. And having a robust agricultural business model will assist to increasing the quality of life of those people. And the second thing that is even more important, especially globally now, is food security. We need to recognize the fact that Kazakhstan, yes, we're self-sufficient on many things, right? On some of the things like poultry or dairy, the work still be required. But we're a great contributor to the stability of, to the food security and food stability, not just in Kazakhstan, but in broader Central Asia. So, and we maintain our commitment to do it, right? And one last point that I wanted to mention, which is, I think, is extremely important, and for those who there's been a notion in the market that ESG and sustainability is a fad that is going to go away. It won't. I was talking to the investors lately, and there's been a notion that individual investors pulled money out of ESG funds, but the amount institutional money that's backing now sustainability or ESG-driven investments is growing. We've seen some studies, social bonds, ESG bonds. There's essentially a discount to borrower cost when they borrow for social purposes. Sometimes the difference can be substantial. And I think what will happen eventually is that even the credit agencies will evolve. We won't get just the rating for credit quality. We will be rated for the quality of our environmental and social commitments. And that in combination will probably create a slightly different market. Holding as a whole is a large borrower internationally through mostly through Kazakhstan Development Bank. But I think for us, it's important that we keep focus on those and continue to invest in our environmental, social, and governance credentials. With that, I think I'm done. Sorry for speaking so long.
Thank you, thank you. So let's start first. I will ask a question for my honorable guest to start the discussion before we go into details and try and talk about the challenges. Is Eurasia really on the right track to actually go towards and reach sustainable development goals? I will start with the lady with us, Ms. Bera.
I will begin by saying also, so it will not be a direct answer to your question, but saying that it's a real honor and a real pleasure to be with you. And as you said, Kanat, it's a totally international place. If I look at us, okay, you are international, but you are from Israel, I'm from France, you are from Kazakhstan, Rungis is from France, and so you are from China. So even on the panel, and you are also international. And if I look at your faces, it looks also a good mixture. So I think this forum is really important, not only by what we are saying, but by the links we are able to establish between us and all the projects and even maybe the conversations we can have. I'm not sure I'm able to answer your question regarding Eurasia, but I just would like to say a few words about the first world, which is Europe. We are totally committed to sustainable development in all areas of what you can call sustainable development. Of course, economy, of course, growth, of course, natural resources, of course, energy. It has become a mantra. You can't do anything, you can't present any project without having demonstrated that you are in the right line, in the right corridor, you are 100% sustainable, you are clean. Okay. Sometimes it is excessive. It is excessive because, and I'm sure you will reach this stage at a certain time, excessive because it's sometimes preventing and ruining good economic projects which are maybe not 100% sustainable, but which could give employment and which could give money. I don't want to give too many examples, but I happen to have been living one example in French Guiana related to a gold mine. Mining in general is regarded as something which is totally non-sustainable, which is spoiling environment, natural resources, birds, butterflies, flowers, trees. French Guiana, to help you, it is the north of South America. It's a French territory. It has a common border with Brazil and another border with Suriname. It's covered entirely by the Amazonian forest. By the way, it's a wonderful place. And French Guiana is a very poor territory. Unemployment, though it is part of France, unemployment is nearly 30% of the active population, and it's very hard for the young people to find a job. Very hard. There is nearly nothing. And it's very rich in gold. It happens to be, by geology, a gold territory. As now, the gold is exploited by illegal ways of people, very poor people, by the way, coming from Brazil, or coming from Suriname. In the worst production way, the most polluted way you can imagine. And there are a lot of accidents and lots of injuries of the people themselves who are doing this exploitation. Some international companies have tried to propose to the French government to do a responsible way for mining, gold mining. And it is possible. But we have such aggressive NGO full of environment ideas that you can't destroy one bird, you can't destroy one tree, you can't destroy one flower, that though we had, I said we because I was a member of the board of the Canadian company which was proposing to exploit a gold mine in French Guiana. So I'm saying we. Though we had all the agreements of all the local elected people, of all the, let's say, professional people around, this gold mine, after 2 or 3 years, and though the French president at a certain time when he was Minister of Economy came and visited us and said that it is a very good and responsible way of producing gold, we couldn't do it. Now, I'm referring to that because you, Kazakhstan, are very rich, maybe one of the richest countries in the world for all minerals and metals underground. You have the richest, maybe, underground in the world. And mining should be one of your key points, And by mining, I'm saying not only extraction, but transformation, because this is also the one of course, the priority of Kazakhstan, and I totally follow. I mean, it would be silly not to work on it. So I hope for you that you will be able to do it, because in France and in Europe, I mean, more generally, because the example I gave for France is the same for all Europe, in particular in Germany. It's nearly impossible to open a mine. So we need, I'm not speaking of gold, gold is not so necessary, but we need for batteries, for phones, for many things, we need natural mineral resources. We have some of them. We can't open mines.
Thank you, Mrs. Pera. Eric, your take on this all. Do you think that Eurasia is on the right track?
I don't know which.
Yours.
Yeah, okay. Is Eurasia on the right track? Wow, that's a tough one.
Here.
Okay, all right.
So you just press.
Yeah, okay. I came here from Bishkek. I spent in Bishkek 10 days trying to understand the country a little bit. And I'm based, actually, I work for the EBRD, I'm based in Tashkent. And I spend quite a bit of time in Kazakhstan as well, and I visit other countries. So the one thing to note, we talk about the region a lot, but it's a very diverse region. These are different countries. One particular way in which countries are different is the basic principle at which they use to operate. Countries like Kyrgyzstan are organized bottom-up. This is bottom-up country. Some other countries, without naming, are much more top-down.
Without naming.
Not naming, top-down. Now, in countries that are bottom-up, the share of SMEs, for example, is not 35, it's not 34. The share of SMEs in total output, employment, it could be anywhere. You know, we don't have very good statistics, but you can hardly find large enterprises. So everything is SMEs. In countries that are top-down, you find a lot of very small companies, or maybe individual entrepreneurs, people who sell stuff, people who drive taxis, and then you have giant companies at the top, very top-heavy. So I may not be directly addressing your question, but I'll come to it in a second. The question is, how do we develop countries using development institutions, the resources that Bitereg has, for example? How do we develop these countries in ways that are most effective and efficient? So in countries like Kyrgyzstan, I did name that country, there is a need for a little bit of organization. So there's a need to introduce a little bit of order and have a little bit less revolutions. That's simple, yeah? In a country like Kazakhstan, you need a little bit more emphasis on SMEs, as Bitereg does through the various means of the Damu Fund, the Agricultural Fund, all the other activities. A lot of it is about SMEs. But the question is, how do we do it? This is a very interesting one. And I would like to use my one example from a country that I lived in a very long time, Georgia, just to explain how things can be done in a different way. So in Georgia, maybe some of you have gone there for skiing purposes. Probably many of you have. There is a ski resort called Gudauri. It's about the same elevation as Almaty, 3,000 something meters. And I've been living there long enough to remember what a mess it used to be. It was no order, total chaos, not enough capacity of the lifts, not enough hotels, no proper restaurants, no proper ski rentals, no proper road to get there, no parking, total mess, and the only thing that worked or was beautiful was the actual mountain. So there were maybe more than one option to develop this resort. One could have sold the whole location to a giant company and have it operated as a single entity. That is one option, top-down. There was another option, and that option was about coordination. And I will stress this word, coordination, a lot, because I think this is what we all should be engaging in a country like Kazakhstan. So what does it mean in practical terms, coordination? In practical terms, it means that you as a government, you set up a foundation and you hire an architect. You hire a Japanese, in that case, an architect to develop a master plan. That costs you some money, but not too much. So you develop a master plan, and this master plan identifies what has to happen, and where, what capacity for hotels, where will be the restaurants, what will be the access road, how much water do we need, and so on and so forth. Doesn't cost a lot, but it provides a coordination plan. And that plan is something that can be used to mobilize resources from the private sector. Now, that is still not enough, because you still have to put in place a few investments, public, but very few. And they did three things. They built a very small section of the road to a new part of the mountain. One, small investment, not many millions of dollars. Second, they improved water supply, because you cannot do a ski resort without water. And third, they built one modern gondola lift. One lift. And everything else happened by the private sector. It was a spark that started a fire. And the fire was a tremendous development of the ski resort, simply because the government coordinated and put in place a few critical investments to put everybody on the map, coordinate expectations, and make sure development happens in a sustainable way.
Thank you, Eric. I see that everyone wants to actually I see that everyone wants to dig directly into the details, so I'm going to go to Mr. Benoit Juste.
Thank you. I would like to thank Bajterek for your invitation, Mr. Chairman. And as Executive Director of Rungis Market, I would like to introduce our field of activity. Rungis Market is a wholesale market for fresh food located in Paris, and it is the largest wholesale market in the world. And it is an ecosystem where all different players of the food sectors are located in order to ensure food safety, food security, food sovereignty. We have a strategy of development of our activities worldwide in Western Africa, in Southeast Asia, in Europe, and also in Central Asia. We have a project in Kazakhstan and also in Uzbekistan. And I definitely think that the development of such infrastructure is very important for the Central Asia region to be on the way for a more sustainable food system. And I would like to underline three aspects. First, agricultural sector is very important in this region. It's already a major field of activity in Kyrgyzstan, in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan. It's also very important for exportation. I think it's the first sector of exportation in Uzbekistan, and they had an increase of export last year of plus 20%, so it's huge. There is a high potential of development of agriculture in Kazakhstan, which is a vast country. You have about 75% of the land which is suitable for agriculture, but only 30% of this land is actually used for agriculture. So it's one of the main goals of Bajterek, and I think it's a very important challenge. And But of course, we have to face with some difficulties, and especially for water resources, and also difficulties for the organization of trade. And it is my second point. First, we have a lack of infrastructure, cold storage, markets, transport infrastructure, transport services. We have some difficulties in customs and regulation. We have a lot of exchanges between the countries inside the region, but there are some administrative difficulties. And also, we have a lack of real professionals, of traders and wholesalers, and this activity is mainly monopolized by transport companies. And the result of this situation is there is a high level of losses. We have about 30% of losses in fruit and veg, so it's not sustainable at all. In Europe, the average ratio is about 5%. We have a poor condition of supply chain, and at the end, we have high prices for the consumer and low quality of the product and high environmental footprint. So all this has to be improved, and I think we are on the right track, since there are several projects in this field, and especially the development of agro-food hubs and wholesale markets. And this type of infrastructure can help for the structuration of the food sector, can help, is absolutely necessary for the improvement of the supply chain, and also to reduce the environmental footprint by increase the ratio of local products, of fresh products, and to increase the awareness of the population for good products and relationship between health and food.
Very good points. Thank you, Monsieur Benoit. And we move to Mr. Chan. Mr. Barry Chan, your take on the right track to sustainable development in Eurasia.
Thank you very much, Afa. Also, thank you for having us, for me to be here to share some of the experiences that we have. I'm certainly not an expert, not to say, or even an active participant in the Eurasia's development, but what I would try to say is share some of the experiences we have in China and see how it relevant to this region. Because I think it also makes sense is because the CICC is an investment bank in China, and we have participated in first Astana Finance Day 5 years ago, and people always ask me why we are so committed or so interested to come to Central Asia for this development. I think it's because those experiences that we have in China seem to be applicable in this country or in this region, that we as a bank, we certainly want to make some profit. So I think the experience will be relevant. So I will start with addressing some in China, what we call this sustainability development. We focus much to say from the policymakers, especially like in 2013, President Xi, he mentioned in a concept called clear water and green mountains, mountains of silver and gold. You know, Chinese love silver, love gold. So what he said is exactly that we translate into environmental protection or sustainability means profit, means money, means fortune to our people. And he even go forward is to make it straightforward is that the economic development, it certainly is a priority in China, but that development environment cannot be sacrificed for that purposes. So I think make it very clear in the last 10 years, since 2013 to now, people in China, we are quite aware of the long-term sustainability issue. Also very interestingly, when President Xi came here in his speech he made in Nazarbayev University, I think he said, no, he pledged that China will go to peak carbon emission by 2030, and also will be carbon neutrality by 2060. So this is also a national goal that all people know that we are working on that vision, like 3060. So maybe that's the kind of experience that we have, is that everybody have a common goal that we know is not easy. Honestly speaking, when President Xi said that we have to go to our carbon emission, peak our emission by 2030, some of those companies, power plants, in fact, they are emitting about 40–50% of the carbon in China. So you can expect that what are they going to do, and what this company has to do in the next few years. But this is the cost that we have to pay. I think people are more on this on the same page that we want to achieve that. And that's also what, from the policy level, we have this 1+N policy, which means that the central government is a very clear direction, and then every different sectors will develop their own policy for their sector, for the industry, or even for their particular province or area. I think we as a bank, what we can do, certainly we can't switch off our lights and say that we are emitting less carbon. That doesn't make too much sense. But what we are doing is we try to, in the financial market, is one thing we did pretty active is about issuing the green bond. We have helped issuer to issue like 96 green bond among $30 billion in 2021 and 2020. Just in 2 years, we have issued this 30 billion bond. And CICC, we also have created a research institute, because it is called CICC Global Institute. It's more like a think tank institute, not primarily for profit-making purposes, but to do some analysis about, particularly in China economy. The first report that we have written, this is static, is about the economics of carbon neutrality. So it have covered all these different sectors, as I said, from those carbon emission-related power, cement manufacturing, and all these related industrial, and all the way to consumer. So I think we have covered that, hopefully, to help the economy be aware of that development.
That's a very good point. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Chan. Let's go. Thank you. Let's speak a bit more now about the details, how we can achieve that. Mr. Kanat, what is the role of the government providing infrastructure, policies? What can be changed? Trying to attract investments, foreign investments. What could be done?
I think it's a very interesting question. I very much liked an example that Derek provided about Godavari, right? And I think this kind of outlines a little bit in a very vivid example what the governments should be doing. And it is important that the frameworks for regulation, the frameworks for achieving the goals that we wanted to achieve on carbon neutrality and sustainability is especially balanced with the, I guess, the social needs of the people. And I'll try to make that argument a little bit broader, right? So Kazakhstan is very lucky in some ways, right? The life expectancy is increasing. Child mortality is very low, right? There's a very, very good literacy record for Kazakhstan. There's 99% of people when they finish high school. So and our birth rate is still high, so it gives you kind of a way of and being in that position is very lucky. But there are places, and I was meeting part of the Egypt delegation, it's 100 million people in a much, much lower income bracket, etc. So we need to understand the social cost of the government regulation if we push it towards environmental and social to those people. And I'm sorry if I'm putting it slightly blunt, right? But if you want to care about environment more than about your general population, you probably will not succeed. Yeah? So, and the idea is that how do we find a way that sustainably balances out the interest of general population with our own environmental goals, right? And also, I think, and I'm sorry, Madame Berard, it's speaking a little bit more on our European partners, right? But if you think about it that way, we grossly underestimated the cost of energy transition.
It's true.
At least Europe did, in a very big way. And those kind of miscalculations have led to enormous energy disbalance within European economies, and that impacted very, very heavily on the quality of life of people who live across Europe. The energy cost is rising, inflation is rising, etc. So, which is why when we're saying, okay, yes, we are fully prepared to support the ESG agenda, the sustainability agenda, but we need to think how the regulatory action or the government action does not create a disbalance that leads to essentially deterioration of quality of life. And in some cases, it's not trivial. It's not that the costs have gone by 5–6%. The energy bills in Europe gone quite high, right? So, and for us, we suffered on the other end of it. And I'm very open about it. Here, the inflation across the country was very high, right? And it's a global phenomenon. It's not just specific to Kazakhstan, right? So that's kind of my points on this.
Thank you. I see that Mrs. Berard wants to reply to that. Go ahead.
I won't say, I could not agree more. And if one considers the energy production in Kazakhstan, you are mainly reliable, or you are mainly using coal. And coal, of course, is one of the most polluted possible energy in the world. But for nearly, I think, 50% of your energy is coming from coal. So you use coal in thermal plants to produce electricity. Now, if you were to decide to use wind, to use sun, to use everything which is renewable, water, you are not very rich in water, but let's say wind, you are wonderful, sun, you are wonderful, okay. The cost would be enormous. And the change between coal and renewable will be so costly if you do it too quickly for the people just to pay their electricity, that I think you cannot do it. So I'm sort of admiring let's say, the targets you have, the political targets which are given by the Kazakh government, and on the other side, when you think of the people and just think of what happened here at the beginning of the year because of cost.
Very good point. So achieving the balance between making sure that the people are living in a better way and also protecting the government is a bit of a challenge. So what are the countries that have best practices and we can take an example from? Mr. Eric?
Just a comment on the issue of environment. I mean, the best way to preserve the environment is to stop having babies. Then we'll have perfect environment.
I don't think people would agree with that. Everyone wants to have a child.
I have 4 children, so it's...
Then you are the last one to preach for that.
But there's one aspect that I really cannot not talk about, and this is skills, education. I often do it. I often show one chart. I could have shown it here that plots, it's a 2-dimensional, very simple chart that plots GDP per capita on the horizontal axis and people's young children's achievement in some sort of international test, sciences, mathematics, English, even their national language. So this is what you have on the vertical axis. And the test is standard so that it's comparable across countries. And many, many countries can take part in this test so you can see the global picture. And what emerges is a very neat correlation. And shouldn't surprise anybody. There's a very neat correlation between how rich people are and how well they do in all these international tests. How well they do in math and sciences, yeah? Not surprising. I mean, if you have more money, you can have better schools. And if you have better achievement in sciences, maybe you can also have a richer economy, right? So there's a two-way correlation. So it's very strong, diagonal, as you know. I could have shown it to you. I don't have it, and on the slide.
Well,
Now,
could you name the countries then? Because we are looking for examples.
I'll tell you one thing. So everybody are more or less on the line, but there are a few outliers. And the outliers are on both sides of the line. So there are outliers, very rich countries, oil-rich countries, in fact, that unfortunately don't do very well in terms of education. So they're way below the line, you know, in terms of academic achievement. And there are countries that are quite poor, and the best example of such a country is Vietnam. Vietnam is the global, you know, it's a major surprise if you look at its location. So it's very poor. It's way poorer than Kazakhstan. It's maybe as poor as Kyrgyzstan, maybe at that level. But the achievement of Vietnamese kids in all these tests is at the level of the leading countries in Europe. Can you imagine that? And the question is, where are we in Kazakhstan on this map? And the answer is we don't know. And the reason we don't know is because Kazakhstan at some point, I believe, was part of this test but wasn't happy with the result and decided to withdraw. So we no longer have the data. But I would like to argue, and this is my policy suggestion.
Mr. Kanat, feel free whenever you want to reply to that.
By the way, it's not just Kazakhstan. I think of all the Central Asian countries, none of them are proud of their achievement, and none of them are on this chart. Armenia is, for example, and is actually doing quite well. Now, the policy suggestion is, we're talking a lot about elite education. We're talking a lot about private schools. That's not going to do it. If you have private schools that are very good, like Nazarbayev schools, excellent, meritocratic, they do not take care of the rural population. They do not take care of the very large mass of people in smaller towns.
Eric, can I intervene just for a second here? Yeah, yeah. Just a brief comment. I just want to say I completely agree with you. The elitization of education is an extremely dangerous phenomenon. Because what happens is that you create essentially two classes of people. And that should be avoided at all costs. There's right now, and it's a multidimensional problem, but I just want to mention, and I'm luckily for me not responsible for education in my job. I cover the financial sector mostly, but
we need to educate people. We need to make them aware about sustainable development.
I just want to make sure that the human capital development for Kazakhstan is incredibly important. I don't remember the exact number. I think it's 440,000 children each year are born here. And the population growth is very strong. And if we don't address these dislocations now, we will have a generation of nets. The people who are not in education, employment, or training, we will have that generation. And I can say how BITERECT has to contribute to this. So this national project, we're building 1,000 schools across. Because even, okay, forget the soft infrastructure, even the hard infrastructure, we have a lot of schools that are relatively of advanced age, right? And I think we're trying to address the physical infrastructure, and there's work being done by the government right now on this. But most importantly, what about the software infrastructure? Who is going to produce all those teachers who are going to teach all those kids? Big question, right? And we're working towards and trying to invest into the universities to produce enough teachers. But the other point is that what all those people are going to do, right? And for us, it's a two-dimensional problem because we need to create high-quality workplaces because otherwise universities would not prepare the engineers if they have nowhere to go. And from that side, BITERECT is trying to help.
I'm so glad we are in complete agreement here.
Totally agree. Mr. Benoit, education, agriculture, food sovereignty. So all these are, how can we achieve food sovereignty in Eurasia?
I think that we will always import seafood in Kazakhstan or in Uzbekistan. but I think we first have to think local. We have to increase the share of local products in food sector. We have to favor the local farmers to develop their activity, to have better and easier access to the market, and we have to improve the supply chain in order to serve the final consumer in good condition. And for this, of course, we need the training and education for this type of jobs, for this field of activity.
I'm going to be, we have to give the, for the lady first.
No, it's not because lady.
Gentle.
No, I just would like to add to what Benoit said, and I also totally agree. The new agriculture is going to be very qualified. It's going to be digital. It's no longer the idea you have the farmer with whatever is a horse or the cow, or I don't know what, the beef. It's going to be highly qualified. So in what Bajterek is doing, trying to develop the agro industry, let's say, there is part for high qualification.
Eric.
I didn't know Benoit before this session. We just met 2 minutes before it started. But Benoit, when I was 22, I worked on a farm, and it was a very small farm. It was 1 hectare in Israel. We were growing flowers. And I was trained on the job for maybe like 6 hours, you know, how to pick the flowers, how to put them in small bunches of 5, and 5 fives was a 25, and then I would put them in a bucket in the refrigerator. And in the evening, all I had to do was to go to the wall. There was an old-style, telephone on the wall, call a number, and a cold refrigerator truck would show at the farm gate. And it would drive my flowers, a few buckets, to the airport and take them to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, to the big flower market. I mean, I didn't know when I was 22 what the significance. I just was happy to get paid, you know. But, many, many years later, when I got this job, of an economist with the EBRD, I started thinking, this may be the way to develop value chains. This may be the way to integrate the small guys, into all these supply chains that we're talking about. You have to organize the logistics. You have to make sure that there is coordination again. I'm back to coordination, yes?
We'll have a few minutes to talk about collaboration and obviously coordination with everyone. Mr. Barichan,
yes.
How can we involve the private sector to make sure that its role is actually ensuring for development and maintaining that they are in line with sustainable development, all the investments that are done by the private sector?
I suppose at the end of the day they're like a law of nature. If you go to financial market, it must be the nature is money or profitability. Because what I want to say, the law of nature is, maybe I bring it a little bit further away, is in Chinese we have this Dao De Jing, which means that everything will have something. You have to follow the nature, otherwise you will, in near term, get punished, or in longer term, it will be a disaster. One thing that in Dao De Jing we mentioned is the water. Water is so good that everybody should perform like water because it is smooth, it's humble, it doesn't care, it doesn't care to clean for your shirts, no matter how dirty it is. And at the end of the day, the water itself will become so dirty, even dirtier than your shirt, but it has no complaint. That is what we were taught to behave like water. But on the other hand, it doesn't mention in the Tao Te Ching is that water can be very fierce. We have all this flood, we have tsunami, we have all this very violent. So I think it goes back to the what is the nature. So again, in this all this development, I'm more in the financial, so the nature is profitability. Like an example, now China is the world's largest producer of EV car, or EV. But we all know that many of these companies in the last 10 years, they have been losing billions of dollars. So it must be someone that willing to invest, and they invest because now they see that, okay, there's a market and they make the money. So I think this is, again, this is what the money will go to, where they thought they will be able to make more money. Now the challenges would be, I just want to finish by making one more point, is that in the last decades or so, we see so much so-called easy money. They are willing to even invest in something that will not make profit in the next 2-3 years, but in the last year we see the interest rate going up. Then there would be a challenge. I won't say it will be a question mark, but it will be challenges for those money to go into some new development, which would need time, which would need money to go into, maybe for the benefit, a long-term benefit of human. But if that stops, then we may create another problem like 5 years, 10 years later.
Okay, thank you. We have 8 minutes before we move to the questions of the audience, so you have plenty of time to prepare if you would like to ask the questions for our speakers. And within those 7 and 8 minutes, I'm gonna ask the question, how do we reach collaboration? This is the main topic. How can we achieve that? How can countries? There was a Eurasian Economic Union that was founded back in 2000, and I think it was signed in Astana. How effective is it, Mr. Kanat?
It's a very good question. Look, single market notion, right, when it unites a large number of people, is always beneficial, right? But what is important is to balance it out between the national interests and the common goods of the for the overall population. So the inception of the Eurasian Economic Union has created a very, very big market, right? And Kazakhstan is part of that. And in some cases, we've benefited from it. And in some cases, we had situations where our local producers were disadvantaged by it. And we have to admit that it's a balancing thing. From the standpoint of the, I guess, economic benefits from us, right? It's very hard to say now, but looking at it kind of with a bit of a timeline later on, it would be much clearer to assess. But even in this specific moment, I think Kazakhstan finished last year growing over 3%. World Bank or IMF just upgraded us. We going to get even higher. I think it's going to be over 4% growth. So from the growth standpoint, I don't think we've been harmed too much in any way, right? Because in the environment where global economy is slowing down, we're doing quite well. But what is important is that how this growth is achieved and on what foundation it's being built. So in that standpoint, from that standpoint, I think we need to be very careful as to how do we analyze this and what priorities we set for growth areas in the future. Having in mind the bigger market that we're part of. And also the other thing that I wanted to mention is that and this comes back to a broader world. I think we're not just part of the Eurasian Economic Union. It's just one facet of it. On the bigger side, we have our great neighbor, China. We've been very recently and met Mr. Barry Chan during our presidential visit to China. And I think China represents a very large producer and a market at the same time. But on the other side of Kazakhstan, just across the Caspian Sea, we have European Union. And I think our role is just slightly broader than just part of one economic union in the middle of the Eurasia. In fact, if you think about us, we are a primary component of a transportation corridor that links up European Union and China. And I think there's a mutual recognition. The European Union has a program called Global Gateway, and they're trying to heavily invest into that. And on the other side, we of course have China with Belt and Road Initiative. And I think the cooperation and collaboration in that area would be very beneficial to both to the success of the economic prosperity of this country and maybe have a positive economic impact on a cooperation between the European economies and the Chinese economies.
Thank you, Mr. Kanat. Eric, obviously the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development might look at this as a chance to bridge the gap and try to enhance this type of collaboration between Europe and Asia. So,
you know, there is a saying: never waste a good crisis. And I think the crisis we are witnessing right now is already causing a lot of change, and I think it's a good change. When it comes to the Eurasian Union, I think what is happening is there is a rebalancing. You know, the Eurasian Union was very unbalanced. You know, there was a dominant power to the north, and everybody else were like pygmies, you know, very small. I think the rebalancing is happening. So there's a shift. You know, in every possible way, when you look at it, there's a shift of people moving to Central Asia. Companies, I think this year alone, there was a 100% increase in the number of companies registered in Kazakhstan with some Russian sort of stakeholders, beneficiaries, and a lot of people, you know, skilled people move. One other aspect in which it becomes more balanced, distribution hubs, all of which used to be in Russia, Moscow, whatever, they're shifting, and you know where? To Almaty, I'm told. So Almaty is in fact becoming a major distribution hub for electronics, for anything.
And so, I'm sorry to cut you, as we are talking about distribution and we have the wholesale market here, Mr. Benoit Juster, I heard that you mentioned before that you are planning to have a central market in Kazakhstan. So how this plan is going in terms of distribution?
Two ideas to be on the way of a more sustainable policy in the food sector. First is to increase the awareness of the final consumer and the people, because when you buy flowers, in Europe they are coming from Amsterdam. It's a major hub in the world for flowers. So you are buying flowers coming from Israel, and with young guys working in these locations, or you are buying flowers coming from Colombia, Ethiopia, and from an environmental point of view, it's just a nightmare. So, and the same for the food, and so we have to increase the awareness about this subject when you buy something for your dinner. Second thing, as Mr. Kanat said, we have to create an efficient framework for the development of proper infrastructure and ecosystem for the food system. And this framework has to be designed in association with the governmental institution and the private sector.
Thank you. Mr. Barichan, how is the collaboration going with Central Asia? Mr. Kanat mentioned that you have projects, and with the Silk Road opening maybe in the future, how is it going? Could you please give us more details in practice?
Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Kanaka make a very good point is that every country will have their role to play in the whole system or in Eurasia. What China can offer is certainly we have the biggest market in the world. So this is a market that China can offer. And we have also very strong production base. I think we're good in that. But no doubt that China is also short in many kind of other resources, including energy, food, land. I think that's exactly that Kazakhstan or some other country in Eurasia will offer it. Mr. Kanaki also mentioned about this, like agriculture fund or food fund. That is certainly, I mean, the two countries together can work. You asked us about this, how to work cooperate. Then I go back to the more like not too theoretical, but cooperate. How we can work? So you must people come together, and then you operate. Then the system itself will be able to operate. Then it reminds me a Chinese word is when we said cooperate in Chinese, 合, which means that go together, 合 together. And its form is like a man on top and a one mouth. So in order to be able to operate, everybody only remember himself that you have only one mouth. No more, it's fair, it's very equal. Don't get people, if you come together, you have two mouths, then you can't cooperate. So I think this reminds us that we have to be cooperate in the equal footing. Thank you.
In 2 minutes before we give the floor to the questions, Mrs. Berab, how do you think cooperation will be? 2 minutes.
I wanted to speak of the RLC. Okay, so, which is another question.
I'm sure there will be plenty of questions.
Yes. I see cooperation as a friendly, let's say, bilateral, but maybe not exactly bilateral. I mean, maybe not always bilateral, as a friendly work made by people who have a mutual interest, as it was said by our Chinese friend, a mutual interest to work together, where the two parties are bringing something which is different, but mainly equal. I mean, it's a work between two friends and two equal partners.
Thank you. Now, please, whoever have question, raise their hands. I would have let the people speak more.
My name is Tom. I actually work in CICC with Barry Chen, who's on the floor.
You don't have to ask me then.
I'll ask you off the line. My question is actually towards Mr. Kanash Shalapayev. So I just heard about, how to be, very cautious about this elitism in the education. So myself is actually from Korea. And Korea economy has been developed, but this elitism is something that is actually happening in Korea. You can actually just Google a drama called Sky Castle. It's on Netflix or Disney Plus, I forgot. It's exactly talking about this elitism of education in Korea, in Gangnam. But I think this actually happens when a country goes to aging society and there's less and less children. So people start to focus more resources on single child. So this kind of phenomenon actually happens. And at the same time, this actually, relates to, in somehow this aging society actually relates to the property market as well, because people in Korea are stopping to have children because of their life are too tough, actually. You have to save 20 or 30 years of income without spending a penny to actually buy a house.
And the question is?
Yeah, and the question is, so the property market is actually a core to developing an economy. But at the same time, this also destroys the environment as well in terms of sustainability. So how would you think, there can be such kind of vicious cycle that happens where you want to go for sustainable development and at the same time destroy the sustainability itself. So what would you think that, a good way to actually, stop this kind of vicious cycle?
Thank you, Mr. Kanat. The question was addressed to you.
Thank you. I like whenever I speak to Korean friends, they always promote Korean creative industries. So it's very, look, I think, and we studied this very carefully, right? So from our side, and I think careful urban planning, right? And careful allocation of the infrastructural resources versus the housing needs, I think is the key solution to the sustainability problem. That's kind of one dimension of it. The other dimension is the usage of right materials for sustainability in creating energy efficient housing. Let me start with the urbanization. I think we have representative here from Kazakhstan Housing Corporation, which is a subsidiary of holding Byterek, which focuses on supporting the construction sectors in the country. And together with the Ministry of Infrastructure and Industrial Development and some really good private sector players, we've developed the standards for urbanization and for the large-scale urban projects. So these standards are now being implemented across Kazakhstan to make sure that we build houses that do not condense population too much, that have access to social infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, and kindergartens. So that's one part of the problem, is trying to encourage people to follow a certain standard when they're building the housing. That's point number one. And point number two is in terms of trying to get to the energy efficient and sustainable materials housing developments as well. I think we're getting a little bit better on the energy efficiency, but we a little bit less on the right and environmentally friendly building materials for housing. And this is just again a balance between the cost and benefit of it. But I'm sure the work will continue to be able to achieve more balance on those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kanat. Anyone has another question? That's the last call. Otherwise, I will take it. I have one. I have one for all of you to end this session because it's been very interesting, but we have 1 minute for each to ask. What are the concrete steps, like 1, 2, 3, to achieve cooperation in Eurasia and at the same time making sure that we are in line with sustainable development goals? Let me start with Mr. Eric. You have 1 minute.
I think I spoke too much. No, I think I ran out of bright ideas. I think cooperation, maybe I'll finish on what I didn't manage to say before. I talked about the crisis that should not be wasted, and I started saying that we are rebalancing towards Central Asia. But there's one more aspect, and that is we suddenly realized here in Central Asia that actually we need each other much more than we thought so. I think a big part of it is what happened in Ukraine. Another important aspect is that Uzbekistan came back. And Uzbekistan is really the central piece of Central Asia. And I think we understand, with all the importance of transportation and logistics, that there are simple things we can still do to improve even the most basic stuff, border crossing points, improve management of border crossing points, and all of a sudden, things, trade at least will improve.
Thank you. Very good point. Mrs. Berard.
Okay. If I were in charge of designing cooperation, let's say between France and Kazakhstan, okay, Europe, France and Kazakhstan, I would not rely that much on the governments, neither on the parliaments. I would try to, let's say, find 4, 5, 6 projects Could be education, could be agriculture, could be industry, could be mining, could be special, you say? Special? Rockets? Okay. Space. Thank you. And I would design for each of them 2 guys, chief of projects, responsible, and having on both sides a coordination ability.
Very good point. Mr. Kanat.
Eric mentioned Uzbekistan, and yesterday during the opening session, I don't know if many people were seen that, there was a Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, and answering very similar question. So what concrete steps we can take? He said, we need to work.
Love it.
Yeah.
We need to work. Mr. Benoit.
Everything starts with education. So I think one of the next milestones is to develop the attractivity of the jobs in the field of agriculture and logistics.
Mr. Bayechan.
1, 2, 3. Okay. I suppose.
You can have 2 if you want.
No, I suppose that at least it should be or come with one common goal. I mean, that's just the basic. And then we need 2 to tango. So from there, I mean, one common goal is developed by at least 2 countries or 2 parties, then we can discuss on it. And 3, I mean, I treat it a little bit free to talk, free to discuss, and free to think about some initiative without any preconditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming to this panel, and thank you for my guests. Thank you for Astana International Forum for allowing this gathering. Thank you all. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.